Okay, take it away.
panid recordima, jah?
Yes.
Hello, you are listening a podcast by two brothers, me, Indrek, and my brother Frederick, where we ramble at topics about philosophy, politics, meta thinking, and so on. Each episode, one of us chooses and prepares a few pages on a topic that is supposed to inspire the discussion. This time it was Frederick's turn, and the topic we discussed today is imagining the world after the pandemic. So basically, we're talking about COVID. All right.
This
Frederick, maybe
intro
you
was
start.
so lightning fast. I'm very impressed. Wow.
Yeah.
No,
Last
so
time it was horrible, so I decided to just read it.
this is like the
and
polar
start with it.
opposite of what happened last time.
I think it's great. Okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I wrote this page about sort of imagining what will be left of the world as we knew it once this pandemic finally ends. Who knows when that will be, but presumably at some point it will happen, right?
Yeah.
And especially like in the last few weeks, as we kind of really are starting to embrace like all kinds of digital technologies and contact tracing and sort of all these kinds of things. Like I gotten to some very interesting questions about how the decisions we're making right now might sort of
Yeah. So because I read your thoughts, and for me they sounded a bit alarmist. But here's the thing: we have two very different contexts. So I'm I'm in Estonia, and you are currently in Netherlands.
Yeah.
And so maybe you start by describing what have you noticed in the past weeks.
Well, yeah, actually it is. Maybe the Dutch context is of course important for this, because we have basically we've had 7,000 new cases a day for like the last week almost. I think 8,000 yesterday. So, and now the country is in like a partial lockdown. It's not really as serious as it sounds, but what it basically means is restaurants are closed, and masks are not mandatory actually, but like strongly advised, and all these kinds of things. So there's some, after a while of quite relaxed, whatever, corona, who cares kind of approach in the Netherlands, people are starting to take it seriously now. And I think it all started with, I heard like in Leiden University, like one of the biggest universities in the Netherlands, or in Europe actually, I think also, they are going to now do exams online, and they are going to monitor the students through webcam, and they're going to record the screens and use the microphones to listen in. And the students are not allowed to leave the laptop, so they have to sort of be in the vision of the webcam at all times. So if you want to go take a piss or something, they have to take the laptop to the bathroom. And it's just,
no, really?
Yeah, I mean, they explicitly said like you cannot leave. Like, well, they actually told them that they cannot just go anywhere. They have to sit behind the computer. But I mean, I imagine. So just these kinds of things. And then yesterday, I am a member of the Council of Representatives in my own academy, like a student representation kind of thing. And then the director told us that the public transport authorities in the Netherlands are like cross-checking the names of, because in the Netherlands, when you use public transport, you have like the card with your name on it. Well, kind of like in Estonia, I guess. And they're cross-checking like the students and their like traveling times to kind of make sure that they don't travel during rush hours, because the conditions that our academy is open at all right now is basically that we start our lessons after 11, where the rush hour is over, so to kind of not stress the public transport too much. So like, well, essentially like the public transport authorities are like monitoring everyone to make sure like when they travel and like
Mm-hmm.
Which of course happens always, but now what I thought is interesting, they're really like making sure that the people from this specific institution are behaving like properly, you know.
So
um,
how do they? I still don't get it. How can they like I don't know manage it or some like even if you
well,
have this information, it's like it's really hard to do anything with it. I would imagine.
yeah, I mean, of course I haven't seen them or like at how they do it, so it's also a little bit uh, guesswork. Totally admit that. But I guess what they do is because they know who studies there. I mean, we're all
Mm-hmm.
registered as students of this school, and then we're also all registered as users of like the public transport. Like we have our
Mm-hmm.
NS cards that have our name on them that we check in and out every time we
Yeah,
use
yeah,
a
okay.
tram or a train or whatever. So I guess they were able to cross reference like the names essentially.
Okay, yeah, yeah. But so what I'm trying to get at is I still don't quite understand what's the agenda or like what the goal is, like
Oh,
what you're supposed to do
the
with.
goal is to kind of, well, one of the because we're a very small academy, so we're actually
Mm-hmm.
allowed to kind of partially work in the building and have lessons
Mm-hmm.
in the building, etc. But one of the requirements is that we don't use the public transport, basically, and especially during peak hours,
Okay,
because
so
that's
you
sort
can
of
have.
a dangerous. That's like a risk, an extra risk for getting COVID essentially if you are using public transport regularly.
Okay, okay. So what they're saying is like you can work in the classroom. So basically,
Yeah,
because you're like in the art academy, so actually it's very hard to work online, I imagine. But you have to basically walk there or drive by car, and
yeah, or bike or
and
yeah,
they are going to control like check it based on like some digital solutions that you actually follow that procedure
yeah,
or this agreement.
yeah.
Okay, okay.
And so
Okay,
what
I get
the
it. Now it's
public
clear.
transport guys told our director is basically that, yeah, we see that you guys are not using public transport at all, so congratulations. You're good to go.
Okay. Well,
So I mean, of course, I mean, I don't want to be like this conspiracy theorist who's saying like, oh, all of this data is, like being manipulated and misused already right now. Like, I don't really think so. I think it's, for now, it seems to be used, for COVID related things.
as
Um,
as they claim, it's used exactly the same they claim as it used right now. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, exactly. But it's just like, I mean, it's just interesting, like as we sort of adopt these technologies that we're able to do this kind of monitoring, like, okay, the pandemic
Mm-hmm,
is going to
mm-hmm.
end at some point, and then like, how do we, like, are we going to just stop and we did that
Yeah,
and
yeah,
put
yeah.
it back in the box and it's going to be fine? Or, like, I think it's really interesting
Yeah,
to,
because
to think about. And also with these exams of like the teachers
mhm.
looking into the students' houses and like, normally like it's this very strange concept because you also never met some of these teachers and then they get to like kind of see everything. And yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm just a privacy freak, but
No, that's totally reasonable, I think. Hmm.
I mean, I think it's strange, because they don't have a choice. Like if they want to get a diploma, they have to agree to this. Nobody
Yeah, I mean,
nobody
there's always like things you can do. For example, you could make cut exams into multiple parts so that you have some breaks in between to do whatever you want to do private. You could have some independent work, more emphasis on some just work in general, like projects, essays, whatever. And I mean, those things, it's not like anyone's ever control like checked that you do them independently anyway. It's more about there's some trust involved, and so you
well,
can like
yeah,
switch the weights, so to speak.
no, exactly. And I think that was a bit also like shocking to me in a way that instead of trying to think in a more maybe innovative way on how to kind of reorganize the education during this like ridiculous time in the world, they're just sort of doubling down on like the weakest strategies that they have already, which is like this yeah, well, I mean, I think that's also subjective, of course. I mean, I'm not like a strong believer in these kinds of examinations anyways, but someone's calling you.
Yeah.
Bummer.
Let me put this on silence.
Silence.
Okay, we will have to cut this out.
You can do that. Well, you can pick it up, because I forgot what I was saying.
Okay, so what were you saying? That's.
Well, it was essentially saying that, yeah, instead of using this time to kind of innovate and restructure the education to fit like the strangeness of the times, the universities seem to just sort of embrace digital technologies to make to enable the very traditional systems that they were put in place, but that don't really work in the digital sphere. At least in my opinion, they don't fit.
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah, that's for sure. And regarding that, so like one of the questions you posed was what will happen after the pandemic? Okay, so that will we just return to normal? I think uh, I think in order for us to adopt some part of this uh, digital tools, it is necessary for them to be used in a useful way, because I think at the base, or like the because every signal I have got everywhere in the different levels of education system that I've talked with people, there hasn't been a single good note about digital well uses, like the digital classrooms or whatever.
Yeah,
And so
I think it's because we're trying to use that, like we're trying to use the digital platforms as like the replacement for the physical classroom or whatever, and like teach in exactly using the same methods as you would in a physical setting, but that doesn't really work because the
yes,
digital platforms are so much more limiting.
in a sense, but they have also
Yeah,
some, you
well,
can
I
do
mean,
some things in digital platforms which you can't do otherwise.
no, but exactly. I mean, just for that strategy of kind of emulating the physical world.
Yeah, like if you wanted to gamify education, now is a perfect time, because
Yeah,
games actually work much better in a digital platform than the non-digital, because you have an automatic process for rules checking. And so yeah,
oh, I need to send you an art game project. It's
art
really
game project. Yeah.
fantastic. You can.
Okay.
I will send it to you later. It's a game about tax evasion. It's wonderful.
Oh no.
You can be Jeff Bezos and.
Oh,
Never mind.
tax evasion. Jeez, that's so immoral, no?
Yeah, but it's also very empowering because like to play the game, to understand how, because through playing it you basically
Mm.
learn the tricks that the big companies are able to do to kind of pay zero taxes.
Oh,
So
so
in
it's
a way,
actually you're learning about the laws.
yeah, like, but because you just get to
Mhm.
experiment and play around with like unlimited amount of turns, you you don't have to know anything in advance. You just try it, and you don't lose anything, you know,
Mhm,
which
mhm,
is fun.
mhm.
Anyway, bit off topic. Um, yeah. Well, basically, I think my two main points was that it's like the physical body is becoming like this dangerous thing that must be avoided as much as possible. Uh, and then because of that, the physical space as well is becoming like this gray area of, like basically be as home
Mhm,
as much
mhm.
as possible because everything outside is the unknown. Um,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But yeah, the statistics are dramatically different in the Netherlands and
yeah,
currently in Estonia. So it's so the difference in population is around 10 times, but the difference in daily new cases around 100 times, even more, even a bit more.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah. It's quite
I take
severe
it
here.
seriously, but I mean, I'm still quite relaxed here. Like,
No, it's
so it's tough,
yeah,
different environment. But let's continue talking about. Okay, so I mean, eventually the pandemic will end, right? Hopefully. So there's still like a small possibility that okay, even if we develop a vaccine, then the vaccine won't work for all. But as far as I understand, it's looking quite promising. So suppose okay, we defeat Corona in 1 year. All right. So that means it's like around 1.5 year of this well uh, this very strange environment uh, where something negative has taken up almost a large part of our attention, right? There's this
yeah,
one this pandemic, and it's taking a like if you consider the amount of attention paid to it in the media, and so it's taking a large part from all the possible topics we could be talking about, right?
yeah,
And so now let's imagine so everything starts to return to normal, and what will be the new normal? So the current new normal is that we have the pandemic, and you actually have to be a little bit careful and avoid traveling as much as possible and so on. But what will be the new normal? Is it the old normal or something else entirely, right?
yeah. I mean, it's of course, I think there's people that are actually finding the current lifestyle preferable of being home more and not traveling as much and not meeting people as much and sort of working by yourself most of the time. Mm,
Mm-hmm.
I guess for me, I mean, it would be definitely like if all the restrictions were to be lifted and all this kind of thing. Like I I would definitely travel for a bit. Um, yeah, I mean, I just think that it's. Well, what would you do?
I don't care.
You don't give
I'm
a shit.
probably yeah, I would probably uh, travel No, I wouldn't actually travel, but more. But I would, yeah, visit the capital more often, probably. So right now, I'm not living in the capital of Estonia, but second largest city, and so yeah, I'll probably visit the capital more often. But that's about it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my lifestyle will be completely different, probably. Well, not completely, but
Hmm.
it would definitely be much more. Uh, yeah, I mean, I just wouldn't be as home as much. I think I would move around a lot more,
Hmm. Hmm.
which then
But
also makes it very interesting to think about, like, like a lot of the EU countries are introducing these contact tracing applications for smartphones,
hmm.
etc., to sort of monitor movements and whether you've been in contact with someone that has COVID, like whatever. And of course,
So
a
so
lot of
far,
people are
say
questioning the privacy of these applications, but
yeah, but they are so far quite voluntary, right? Or
yeah, no, they
because
are voluntary. But
yeah,
in a way,
because
also there's quite a strong push in the Netherlands to use them.
hmm.
Um,
Okay. How does it I don't know, manifest this push?
well, just the government really like recommending it all the time in their press conferences, etc.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think also from my school, we've been recommended to use them.
Okay, but is there like, do you sense some actual pressure? Because, yeah, if like, I don't know, if you read it on the news, no one will like care. It's not like an actual pressure.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. Yeah, I mean, it's not pressure in the sense, of course, that I don't feel that if I don't do it, someone
Hmm.
will be look at me any differently or whatever.
Hmm.
I think there is a lot of also understanding about skepticism to use these kinds of tools,
Hmm.
um, even when the people don't, when they themselves are not skeptical, they still kind of
Hmm.
understand why you would be. So in that sense, no, I mean, it's not like this huge pressure or anything, but yeah, it's still somehow there. Um, and I mean, I get it, they're probably useful right now to
Yeah, they should make like tracking contacts easier, but I'm a bit worried. Like, okay, suppose you even actually get like someone gets COVID, and so you from the application you see, okay, there are like 1,000 contacts throughout the last, I don't know, 3 4 days, right? Because he just walked around city or he was in public transport, and and so it's like, how useful do you think that is? Then you
yeah, I mean, that's also like what I've been thinking about is a little bit like at some point. Well, it's also, I mean, the contact they define, I think, is like longer than 15 minutes or something like, or
mm,
longer than 10
okay,
minutes or
okay,
something. So it's not like if you walk past someone with COVID, you
yeah,
get like
sure,
but
that filters a lot, for sure.
that filters a lot. But obviously, I mean, it's, yeah, like if more or less, if like a majority of like if it continues to spread in the way that it
Hmm.
is doing right now in the Netherlands, the majority of countries is going to have COVID at one point, right? So then, yeah, that's not going to help anymore, like this contact tracing,
Hmm.
because everyone's been in contact with someone that has COVID, and it's like, okay, cool. But so I mean, I
Hmm.
think it's much more useful in a country like Estonia, for example, where you actually can, like, if everyone would be use this app, and I mean, coming in contact with COVID is quite rare in Estonia still.
Hmm.
So then if you do come and it lets you know, then you can quarantine and, happy days, not spread it around more. um
That's an interesting point. Is that this technique is much more useful, or is even maybe even only useful when you have a small amount of cases, but in practice is like no one's, like the majority is not going to start using it before things get serious, right? So there's like this
Yeah,
dichotomy here of like when it's useful and when it's viable, or like in a sense.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it, yeah, because in the Netherlands the situation is out of control already. So
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
yeah,
I mean, 8,000 a day, it's still so in a month it's something like 240,000. In Netherlands it's how much is it? It's 2% of the population in a month. Mm.
yeah.
So it's still not gonna be like everyone, right? It's
No,
still
of course not. And then it's
it's
also like,
yeah.
yeah, wow. Actually, what you're right. Of 2%. This is why I'm also like a bit skeptical about all of these regulations. Is like, what is this for? Like, I mean, I understand. I think wearing masks makes sense. Keeping some social distance makes sense, etc., etc. Like not
Mm-hmm.
partying like wild animals makes sense. But at the same time, I feel like this contact tracing to this extent is, I mean, all of these. These kinds of things are essentially introduced when the government says, like, okay, you're not following the rules that we've set out of like social distancing and like whatever. And then we're going to have this extra measure of this app, and then we'll be able to monitor you and what you do and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, another thing is also like 2% of the population, but they want everyone to have the application. So what do they do with the data of like the 98% that never come into contact with COVID? It's like,
No, no,
they're
no, they
just,
do come. Like probably, like if 2% already has it, then I think a large portion of the population will come into contact. But
yeah,
obviously, most of them won't actually catch it because yeah, it's not quite how it works. But yeah, so there is definitely always more contact than there is spread.
true. Well, what do
But
you think about it? I'm curious because I'm not really sure like where I stand exactly, but it's just like these past few weeks I've been starting to think about like the long-term consequences of all of these kinds of things.
yeah, so definitely, um, definitely, I think in general we should always be watching out for um, everything privacy related, and when we give up privacy for some, well, other benefit, and I think like we've already seen it in our lifetimes. Well, maybe you were maybe too young when the 9/11 happened, but I was already, well, I was also young, but I understood what was happening at some level. And afterwards, well, you could see that the US became much more strict. And after we had Snowden revelations, we realized that they were actually really disregarding many aspects of privacy, not only to other people, other countries' residents, but also their own, and so on. And so there's always this question. Okay, it's like uh, so I guess there is this discussion like privacy versus security, but at the same time, what I've also like what I do believe is that all those uh, mass surveillance things are really not that effective. And if you start now, it might not be the case with
Yeah,
pandemics,
but it's
like
not
because
about,
pandemics too. to behave differently than, for example, terrorism or something like that. But yeah, okay, you were saying.
Well, in the case, so exactly, I think pandemics behave completely differently, and they can
Yeah.
be much more effective in this realm. But in the realm of terrorism and these kinds of things, um, yeah, they've proven to not be effective. That's true. But also, I think the that's exactly the point that these privacy advocates make, and that basically, like, I don't believe that the government is uh, just fucking it up to such an extent that the cause is good, but the system is not uh, effective. I just think,
Mm-hmm.
well, I think it's much more really about sort of this accumulation of power to different sources, and the
Yeah.
cause is just fluff.
Yeah, because what you're doing through that, you're developing certain competence, right? You are developing capabilities, like uh, uh, like you mentioned that the transport department will told your school director that, okay, good, your students are not using our transport systems, right? As they're not supposed to. Okay, and that to actually get that kind of data, you have to develop some kind of competence. You have to develop capabilities to filter that from your data,
Yeah.
right? And so once you have developed them, right, so it does change uh, the landscape a little bit, because when the previous previously it's like, okay, I have this large data set, uh, but I can't be bothered to do anything, I don't know, malicious with it, right? Because it's complicated. Why should I? But now that you have the capabilities, okay, so the price to do anything um, that you're not supposed to be doing is already a little bit cheaper.
Yeah.
So that's definitely the case. But but is it going to be a problem in practice? That's that's really about, a question about human nature and the society, and it's really hard to predict. Like, I think it's really
No,
going
of
to
course.
be
And I'm
different
also not,
depending on the culture of some, um, how do you say, some organization.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
exactly. And I mean, I'm also not complaining that for sure all of this is going to be used maliciously in the future,
Hmm.
like I think there's also a good enough chance that it won't be like that.
Hmm.
Um, but also what makes me worried being in the Netherlands is also like this, like I'm observing, especially amongst uh, like the Dutch people that are of course are much more connected to like the political, well, the local politics than all of the kind of
Hmm.
expats are, right? Is that there is this kind of, for me, quite an alarming amount of trust in the government, in a sense that, like, when there was this debate
Hmm.
about, for a long time masks were not really a thing to be worn in the Netherlands, even though the
Hmm.
cases were rising, and like a lot of the international community was like, okay, but why are we not wearing masks? All the students are coming back from these countries where you have these kind of quite strict regulations and whatever. And I think we got a lot of responses from otherwise very credible, intelligent people who basically just said um, that the masks, but that basically our government knows what we're doing, and I'm sure that if the masks were actually needed, our government would mandate them.
Hmm.
So there is this kind of, yeah, this kind of trust in like power that I don't see happening in Estonia, for example, where everyone is basically very critical of
Yeah, sure. Not everyone, but a lot of people,
Yeah,
let's say.
of course. Um, and I think that's also a little bit worrying because when you have, I generalize, this is like just purely from my own experience. Like I don't have any data to back this up or anything. But just when you have a population that is quite trusting of the government, and when you're talking about digital solutions and like privacy matters, that the average person is really like doesn't really have the skills to understand or counter argue against, it's just like this perfect stage to kind of take advantage of people, I find.
Okay. So I think this leads to like a philosophical question of how should an individual approach his her privacy, and how should an individual approach the technology that we are being introduced to over the years, that we've already been introduced to. Uh,
Yeah,
and it's so like what are the stakes for the individual, like, so can we differentiate where does it matter? uh, I think
yeah,
it's really hard to have this discussion about this COVID and the implications that arise now before we have this sort of underlying understanding or like a broad approach uh, about the technology and privacy in general.
yeah.
So um, so there are like certain like extremes. So it's like one extreme is okay, the book of Orwell, where the entire society is completely being dominated and controlled by certain forces, and those who are not like in complete control there, except for the very few, they are they are born into a state where they have no chances for winning, because everything they do, all their interactions are controlled, and so there is like you have no chance basically, right? That's like an extreme. It's like a picture that's really part of our culture, and uh, and so obviously the current reality uh, is nowhere near that, especially in Europe, not in the United States, and not even in China. But in China is, I mean, they are pushing there. I mean, actually, it's not so funny, but they are pushing there. Um, but even they are not there yet, obviously, right? Uh, and so the other extreme
Well,
is,
I think where this is happening the most is probably not on a governmental level, but on a commercial level, probably.
yeah, right
Like
now
with
it's for
these
sure in
tech
the commercial.
companies like Google, Facebook, all this kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, but at least I think, like at least the majority of people I've spoken to, like there's a very like with tech companies, at least there's a very clear transaction. It's like, okay, like I get to use a free service and I give up some of my rights, so you
I
can
mean,
do advertising.
this clarity in the sense is very very pragmatic. I mean, yes, sure, there is a clear transaction, there is a voluntary transaction, but often what I would claim, it's often not a conscious transaction, if you know what I mean.
Um,
Because
yeah,
in order
that's
to have a conscious
true.
transaction, you would have to be more aware about what it all means to you, and for that, I think it's non-trivial to
Yeah,
figure
no,
that
that
one
is
out.
that is true, but still, I don't, it's not a completely conscious, nor is it a completely informed transaction, in the sense that we don't actually maybe realize how much of our data we are giving up, or what
Yes,
elements
yes.
exactly.
And who do they sell it to, and for what price, and so on, right?
Yeah, but still, I think there is a general and understanding amongst people that
Yeah.
they are being exploited to an extent to be able to use
Yeah.
this service.
So if you like something in Facebook or YouTube or wherever, you are feeding an algorithm. Okay, that's, I think that's something a lot of people have at least some kind of idea.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But so now it's like, I admit I haven't figured this one out for myself either. Because, so how valuable is this privacy and all these things? Because it's really, it depends. Like, in the today's context, I might look and say, maybe it's so important. But what if the political landscape changes, right? It's like, then it's all the comments, all everything you've ever said, everything you've liked. Okay, it's in a database. Okay, it can be tied to your person.
Well,
Um,
that's exactly the thing. Also, with these contact tracing apps, like even if the current government is trustworthy, like in
mm,
2 elections, you might have a, completely like nutcase party running for winning the, taking the seats in the
mhm,
cabinet or whatever, and like looking at, oh, we have these nice tools, let's use them for political gains, like. Uh,
mhm,
I
mhm,
think in the
mhm,
Netherlands, of course, it's difficult. It's more difficult to do that, because I also think that the sort of civil servant state is so refined here that the politicians are not perhaps the most powerful people actually,
mhm, mhm,
um, but it's actually the bureaucrats and the administrators and whatever.
mm.
Uh, but still, I mean, it's something to think about. Also, fun. This is a bit off topic, but do you remember some years ago we had this talk where we were talking about? I think you had this idea of like a web browser that would essentially feed uh, like bullshit data about, like, for example, like Google location tracking or whatever. That
Mhm,
you
mhm.
would have this kind of thing on your phone where instead of blocking the Google from getting your data, it would just feed it like false data,
Yeah, yeah,
kind
yeah.
of
So
guerrilla warfare.
you create distortion in the algorithms, and so it's
Yeah,
like you basically devaluate the information about you. So it's like they might know where you are, but because they also know you are in a lot of wrong places, or the places you are not, they actually don't know anything. And so
yeah, exactly.
yeah, exactly, it's like you like random things and so on. Yeah,
And I
that's.
think this is maybe also like the kind of, in a way, the best solution, right? Because it gives the control to the individual. So like during a pandemic, when I maybe have a government I can trust, I can be
Mhm,
like, okay, I'm going to give you real data about where I go, so you can do the contact tracing and public safety, yay.
mhm.
But once the pandemic is over and maybe the government changes or whatever, I can decide that, okay, I don't trust you anymore, so I'm just going to feed you these lies about where I am and what I do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so actually we again return to the state is that you just have to be able to trust the population, but also the population has to be able to trust the government. And without that, it just won't function.
Yeah.
And so it's like no matter how much you try to control it.
But of course, the
Mhm.
government cannot trust the citizens, because the citizens in the Netherlands, I mean, we wouldn't be in this corona like 8,000 new cases a day if we
Yeah, But the population density is just so huge, it's
Yeah, but it's not about that. I mean, you have people like partying, all the bars are open, full
mm,
of people. There's not even like an attempt
okay.
to
Okay.
not get COVID, you know? It's a
All
completely,
right, okay. Fair. That's fair. But did they shut down the bars and like all the partying
yeah,
places, or?
now I think on like from Wednesday onwards they did, but that was only like a couple of days ago now.
Yeah, perhaps it's too late. Too
Yeah.
uh
And of course, that's the thing is like most of the regulations in the Netherlands have been strongly advised. Like if you come from a red zone somewhere, the quarantine is not mandatory. It's just advised. All these kinds of.
mhm.
So, which is also interesting because it kind of also says like, oh, the government is not actually willing to in a way really like make things mandatory.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, yeah. At the same time, of course, Estonia is, I think, quite a good example of a government that uses a lot of tracking, I guess, of citizens, because or not
Okay, in what
tracking
sense?
necessarily, but there's a lot of. I mean, Estonia is a very digitally,
Yeah, it's
uh,
digitized. Yeah.
yeah, super digitized state, which of course means not tracking per se, but there's a lot of accumulation of data about
Okay, yeah. That's fair.
citizens.
Mhm.
And so far, it seems to be fine. Like it hasn't been really misused anyway, or like the security of it seems pretty strong. Um, so yeah, it's just maybe a kind of an optimistic thing also that it doesn't necessarily like if a government knows things about the people, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be misused.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, yeah, I don't know, I feel like I've been talking too much.
Yeah. So regarding all these things, I think I would like to get back to the point of really approaching it from an individual's point of view. So what should I demand? It's like, so I talked about one extreme. The other extreme is that okay, we don't use the digital technology at all. Like that solves the problem. No more privacy issues. It's like no
Yeah,
more databases, no more phones, so on. Like that's like the other extreme, and it's like, well, that's not so good either, right? Because all this digital technology does give you a competitive advantage. It's like you cannot use them really. I mean, you can, but uh, it's not a viable. It's not a very viable strategy. Now you can use them less while it's still being viable. But anyway, where I'm trying to get is, so we should ask what should be the conditions, what should be, how should, mm, what can be done to guarantee the fair use of my data? What can be done to make it more transparent? And there are some solutions. They're very very technical, right? Um, and so how should the entire, how do you say, this entire process of okay, there is companies that make innovative digital solutions, there are consumers that use it, and there perhaps is some regulatory thing that makes sure that okay, the companies uh, protect the data in the way they promise, at least that, okay, that that if they promise to have certain algorithms or protection in place, that they actually do fulfill.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's definitely possible, right? I mean, this is like a very
yeah.
rudimentary example, but uh, well, like let's say that you actually have this contact tracing app, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then part of that app it should also be like, I don't know, like for example, if you use Google Drives or something and you have a file
Mm-hmm.
on Google Drives, you see like who edited it when, who sent it to who, you know, like you have like this
Yeah.
history of what's done to the
Yeah.
file. Like the same thing should basically happen for like the the file of data that's gathered from this coronavirus tracking app, where you see like, okay, which government institution looked at it, who sent it to who, like who was the administrator that, you know, like for
Mm-hmm.
how
Mm-hmm.
long did they study it, you know, whatever, like, or was it just automation that was managing the data, or did an actual human person come in touch with it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like all
Mm-hmm.
these kinds of
Yeah,
um,
that's exactly like that it goes both ways. So if someone actually uses your data, then they can't do it in secrecy, basically.
yeah, exactly.
Uh, all right.
And I don't even think that of course it's an incredibly complex system to enable that technically, but I don't think it's something that we haven't really done before, like
No,
at
it's
least on
definitely
smaller
doable.
scale.
It's like it's just in practice is like whoever implements the system always have like complete power over the data, and so it's like to guarantee that there is no
Yeah,
how do you say, that there are no backdoors or whatever.
no bias.
Um, no, yeah, yeah. For example, that too, I guess. Uh, uh, or there are like no secret ways to, I don't know, get around of all this transparency. This is like I. So how would such a regulatory body look like? Because first of all,
Yeah,
that
well, in
body
the
would
case of,
require technological knowledge. They would require competence or capacity to understand.
and would
Uh,
also require an electorate that actually understands the need for such a body, right? That
yeah, yeah.
understands the value of these of their own data, you know.
Hmm.
And I don't think
So
that
again,
really, in a way, like I said before, like with big tech companies, there is this general understanding of that I'm being exploited for something to use
hmm
this service. But in the case of governments, I don't know, like it's the equation is, I think, much less clear of like,
hmm
because it's
hmm
not that there is a clear uh you know, that there is a clear example of misuse. It's about the possibility of misuse that doesn't matter whether it has happened yet or not, you know.
hmm hmm hmm
um, which I think is a much weaker argument than saying you're already misusing my data and this is why we need to do all of these things.
I mean, yeah, that's really depends on the attitude. Like if you would consider certain uh, not having vulnerabilities as a valuable goal, then it's not like then it's perfectly fine argument to make that this could be used in such a way. Um, but yeah, it's like I think human psychology or humans often work that okay, if we haven't seen an example in real life, then I don't think it's actual problem. And uh, and I kind of understand because it's a quite a strong heuristic. It works it works amazingly often.
Yeah, but at the same
This
time,
heuristic.
of course, we have also seen examples, like when we talked about 9/11 and everything that happened after that. You know, I mean, of course, it's much more emotional topic, because it was really an attack on a city, on a country, you know. So it's not a very personal, like a specific one, like it was intended to be happening where it happened, right? Which I think makes it much more emotional. So of I do also, you know, it's not at all surprising the kind of abuses of privacy that were made possible through that, right? Like the extent is shocking, but at the same time that it happened is not surprising for me.
Yes, and we as a society still don't understand this, like to a large extent. Okay,
Yeah.
too many people like consider it like a non-issue.
Yeah,
and
but then at the same time, I mean, it's like, I do think, I mean, this is also what makes it so difficult to have this discussion, because I'm not like a technology expert, so I'm not able to really understand these systems fully, right? But I can imagine that the tools used in the case of counterterrorism and the tools used in the case of coronavirus control are very similar in some ways.
Yeah, I think in some ways they are.
So, yeah.
Because, like, if we get back to the privacy in general, so for example, one thing you can see from the private sector, okay, Facebook, Google, and so on. So what are the sort of costs you basically pay by giving up your information is you're basically revealing, you're potentially revealing your psychological vulnerabilities. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's like, okay, they are only abusing it to sell you stuff you probably don't need, right? Or maybe sometimes you do need, but still it's like, so that's actually quite a tangible cost you're giving up
But I
potentially.
think the difference is, right, that with private companies, the goal of the company is very clear. Like, they just want to make money and be a successful business, right? When a government does the same thing, the goal is much less ambiguous, because there are many goals.
It could be ideological.
Yeah, and also the goals change
related
all the time.
Yeah.
Which I think that's sort of what makes it so hard to judge in a way whether it's a good thing or not.
Yeah, it certainly makes it more troubling. Okay, so what else?
I still think this Gorilla browser where you get to feed false data to anyone that is tracking you is wonderful.
Oh yeah, it's just I can't be bothered. Maybe I should.
Maybe it exists.
But it probably does. It probably does. I mean, it would be fun. Randomly click some commercials and then automatically closes themselves without you ever figuring it out.
Although you might start to get some really weird commercials.
Yeah, that's the point. Weird recommends in YouTube, strange search results you never expected.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing. At least you can also make the case that this tracking that the companies do is also useful for you, because you like to have the videos you want to actually watch on
Yeah,
YouTube as your recommended things, and the
sometimes
songs you
for
like to
sure.
listen to
Yeah.
on Spotify, and
Mhm.
like on Facebook, even like the advertisements I get are mostly for things that, like, I don't think I've ever bought anything because of a Facebook advertisement, but the
Mhm.
things are not, the stuff I get recommended is not like completely far off from what I would spend
They
money
are
on,
perhaps even a little bit entertaining. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just,
Mhm.
I wouldn't, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't spend money on these kinds of things, but they're not like, yeah, exactly. It's just, it is somewhat plausible. Um, I don't know. I feel like we've run into a dead end.
Okay, so maybe let's wrap this up, and thanks for listening.
Oh, but no, let's not wrap it up yet.
Let's not wrap it up. Okay, you had something in
Well,
mind.
I will wrap up. Like, I guess one important thing is then that the individual somehow needs to become in control, also in terms of
Mhm.
the knowledge about the worth of data, and then sort of some tools should be implemented so they can monitor data, right?
Mhm.
But just take this very specific example of like the students in Leiden University who are going to do these online exams, and
Mhm.
the screens are gonna be recorded, and webcams and microphones and whatever. Like, what do you do if you don't agree with that, like, as a student? Because that's not like when they came to the university, when they signed up in the beginning of the year, that's not what they were told, or like that's not the deal that was made then, right? That was
Yeah, I
a
mean,
thing that happened
there
in
was there was
between.
very little deals made, anyways. But yeah, I get your point.
Yeah, okay, but then if there's very little deals made in the beginning, that's then also, I think it's a bit unreasonable for a university to not at all speak to students about how they're going to do this, and they just do it like, bam,
Yeah,
this is how it's
yeah,
going to
yeah,
be.
yeah. But I mean, it's like a little bit concerned. But I mean, from university's perspective, it's like you can always leave, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of harsh. It's very little you can do.
Well,
Mm,
I would have, I mean, I would like them to, I don't know, uh, make masks of the prime minister in the Netherlands, and wear the masks and play hard pass in their room while they do the exam to fuck up the microphone, and maybe have 7 screens open so to confuse the universities about what's actually going on. But
mhm.
I mean, that's also like the fun thing, right, with these digital things, right? Is that is you actually do have a lot of control, because somehow it's connected to the physical space, and where it's completely up to you how you behave, right?
Mhm.
I mean, if everyone just decided to tape their cameras and turn off their microphones, the university couldn't do anything, right? But then there is like this culture of disobedience that has to be strong in like amongst the student population.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. That's there are so many questions regarding that. Like, do you want that? Why do you want that? Maybe have you communicated it already? That it's like, does it? how many students even care about that. Maybe they don't mind.
It was quite a controversial thing, I heard.
Yeah, I can
Well,
imagine. Like, especially this like thing that you can't go to the bathroom, or like you should have some like 5 minutes, 10
yeah, it's
minutes
completely
throughout the
ridiculous.
exam where you can do whatever, and it's like,
No, but
I
then it's
mean,
like this worry that in these 5 minutes they'll just Google all the answers. It's just like,
yeah, but I mean, then it's like your exam is made up in a way that enables it somehow. It's like, you're
yeah,
not
no,
Google up all answers with 5 minutes. Come on, you can maybe
I
one.
mean, exactly. I agree, but I think that's like the universities seem to be skeptical of these kinds of.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. Well, anyways. Okay, feel free to wrap it up.
All right. To wrap this up, we don't know where this is going. I think privacy is an important topic. We should discuss it. Hopefully, COVID will end soon. Context matters. Governments, you should be more you should suspect governments more than private business. I don't know. That's it.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good talk. Bye.
Bye bye.